Dungeon Dice Monsters. This spin-off style of dueling only had 3 episodes dedicated to it. However, it made a big impact, as it had its own real-life and Game Boy Advance versions made of it. Sadly, it never truly caught on, because that's all we really got for the Dungeon Dice Monsters game. But I thought, for today, how about we properly lay out all of the rules and mechanics of the Dungeon Dice Monsters anime game, and we can see if it really is just like Duel Monsters, or perhaps it's something more. Let's jump in. Dungeon Dice Monsters is a board game variation to the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game. Technically, it was made as its own separate game. However, after receiving funding from Maximilian Pegasus, Pegasus insisted on putting some Duel Monsters into the game as well, kind of like a collaboration. So essentially, by doing this, he has combined the Dungeon Dice Monsters universe with the Duel Monsters universe. Pretty cool. The game is played on a 13 by 19 tiled board, totaling 247 playable squares. On the center square at the ends of both players' sides of the field is the Dungeon Master. The Dungeon Master, essentially, it's the player. It would be me and you if you were the opponent. Each Dungeon Master has 3 life points. The objective of the game is to make your way over to the opponent using dungeon paths and then attack the opponent's Dungeon Master 3 times to reduce their life points to 0. Doing this will win you the game. Pretty simple so far. But how do you create the dungeon? How do you move? How do you attack? Well, that's where the dice come in. At the beginning of a dungeon duel, each player selects 12 dice to use for their dice pool. Your dice pool, basically all the dice you have chosen to play with, this is essentially picking your deck. And the reason that's because is every dice contains a unique monster. Monsters inside the dice have attack points, defense points, and health points. And some monsters have magic effects and/or trap effects. At the start of a player's turn, you draw 3 dice at random from your dice pool. You roll these to begin your turn. The color of the dice represents the type of monster that is inside. White are spellcasters, blue are warriors, yellow are zombies, green are beasts, and red are dragons. There is one exception to this rule, however, and that is black dice. Black dice contain a unique item that can be placed on the board for a unique effect. For example, 2 such effects shown in the anime are a powerful cannon that can launch a monster anywhere across the board to destroy an opponent's monster. Or perhaps, how about a teleporter that can teleport any monster that passes through it anywhere on the map that another is set up. Each dice has 6 variations of crests on them: summon, movement, magic, attack, defense, and trap. The crests are used for gameplay. Okay, so let's go over these crests, shall we? The first is summon crests. This type of crest appears on every single dice and is used to summon a monster. When you roll to start your turn, if at least 2 out of 3 of the dice land on identical level summon crests, you can choose one of them to summon a monster with. The level of the monster inside is shown by the number on the summon crest. The levels of the monsters range from level 1 to level 4. Level 4 being the most powerful and level 1 being the weakest. However, as a result, the more powerful a monster is, the more difficult it is to summon. How do they make it more difficult to summon high level monsters? Well, what they do is a level 1 dice, well, that has 4 summoning crests on it. And then as we progress up the levels, we lose a summoning crest for every level. Level 1 dice, 4 summoning crests. Level 2 dice, 3 summoning crests. Level 3 dice, 2 summoning crests. And level 4 dice have only 1. So someone do the maths on that. If I roll 2 dice that are both level 1s, what are the odds of me rolling 2 of those summoning crests? And if I have 2 level 4 dice, what are the odds of me rolling that one? Let me know in the comments. For some examples, Yugi built his dice pool full of high-level monsters, and because of this, he was unable to summon for several turns, whereas Duke played several lower-level monsters, and thus almost guaranteed all of his summons for each of his turns. And in one instance, Yugi did roll 2 summon crests, however, they were odd levels, and so the summon failed. When a dice is used for a summon, it cannot be used again. Once you've summoned with it, it's gone out of your dice pool. You can't redraw that dice again. And while I can't confirm it in the anime, most likely there is a summon limit. This will most likely range between 7 and 10 summons. Once you've summoned 7 monsters, for example, you will no longer be able to summon any more monsters. But what that does mean is the remaining 5 dice that you've got in your dice pool, you can keep using those now for materials. When you summon, the dice unfolds into a dungeon path. The dungeon path comes in one of 10 variations. Some of these are just flipped upside down, but you get the gist. Monsters can walk across the dungeon path to reach the opponent. Your first dungeon must start connected to your dungeon master. New dungeons must attach to your dungeon and must not overlap any other dungeons. This means you can't build branching off of your opponent's dungeons. And it also means if you're not careful and you let your opponent get set up, you can get completely cut off from progressing any further up the board, possibly even limiting the amount of summons you can make due to a lack of space, as was the case with the Yugioh vs Duke duel. When a player rolls anything other than a summon crest, those crests are stored in the player's crest pool. So then, let's talk about the other crests, shall we? Movement crests. You can use any number of movement crests to move as many monsters as you want, 1 space for each movement crest. Your monsters can pass through your own monsters, but not through your opponent's. Monsters cannot be moved onto a square already occupied by another monster. Monsters can only move once per turn. Once you stop moving a monster, you cannot move it again that turn. So let's just say I have 5 movement crests stored in my crest pool. I can move 1 monster 5 spaces if I want to, or I could move 2 monsters, 1 3 spaces and the other one 2 spaces. However, what I'm not allowed to do is move a monster 3 spaces, attack the opponent's monster, and then move back 2 spaces. You're not allowed to do that. In fact, speaking of, what happens if an opponent's monster is blocking your path? Well, that's where the attack and defense crests come in. If an enemy monster is within 1 space, you can attack it by using an attack crest. You can attack with as many monsters as you want each turn, but each monster can only battle once per turn. What that means is I can move one of my monsters in range of a monster, attack with that monster, move another in, attack with that monster, move another in if I really can, attack with that monster. However, I can't attack and attack again with the same monster unless it has a special ability. For an example, Knight of Twin Swords has a special ability. It allows it to attack a single monster multiple times by using multiple attack crests. In fact, it's worth mentioning now, there's a lot of monsters that have special abilities that can defy a lot of the rules that I've stated here, but for the most part, as a general rule, everything I'm saying applies to every monster unless it has a special ability, basically. When a monster is attacked, the attack points of the monster are dealt as damage to the opponent's monster's health points. If that monster's health points reach 0, it is destroyed. However, the defending monster can use a defense crest to defend itself. When that happens, the defense points of the defending monster are subtracted from the attacking monster's attack points. The result is dealt as damage to the opponent's monster's health. For example, Minotaur with 30 attack points attacks the Knight of Twin Swords, which has 10 defense points. 30 attack minus 10 defense equals 20 damage. However, since Twin Swords has 30 HP, he loses 20 HP, he's still got 10 left, so he survives the fight. Finally, we have Magic and Trap Crests. You can activate a monster effect during your turn by using a Magic Crest. Effects can be activated as many times as you want, as long as you have sufficient crests. For example, by using 3 magic crests on the monster Thunderball, you can move it continuously in a straight line until it hits a monster or a wall. If it hits a monster, it is automatically destroyed, and the monster comes to a stop. And then, if you still have some magic crests left over, you can then use the effect again. to use the move once more. Or if you want a really broken ability that is also pretty cheap to use, Dark Magician's effect only costs 2 magic crests. And what does it let you do? Well, it lets you teleport to any zone an opponent's monster occupies. And when you do that, you destroy the monster that occupied it. I don't want to say this monster's broken, but that essentially means, let's just say there's a summon limit of 7 monsters. Your opponent has 7 monsters out. Let's just say you have 14 magic crests. You could just use all those, teleport to every single one of the monsters, and just wipe your opponent's entire field. And then just make sure the last one you teleport to is right by your opponent's health points, and you win. Fun fact, that effect was so broken, I just wanted to check, see if that effect carried over to the real world Dungeon Dice monsters. Dark Magician in the real world Dungeon Dice monsters does not have the effect. It is a vanilla monster. Okay, good, because that would have been really broken. You can activate a monster's trap effect during the opponent's turn by using a trap crest. Some monsters, instead of having magic effects, they have trap effects. These can only be used during your opponent's turn, most likely when they're being attacked. However, it can vary between monsters. An example of this would be Strike Ninja's ability. When it's attacked, you can use 1 trap crest to make it unaffected by all monster attacks and effects. Finally, if multiple trap or magic effects are activated in sequence, resolve them in a chain in reverse order. And I just want to quickly show you this. This is from the Dungeon Dice Monsters IRL game. This is how a turn would normally look and play out. And so, with that, that was the Dungeon Dice Monsters anime rules. Keep in mind, there's obviously the real world and the video game one, and they have slightly differing effects. For example, the Dungeon Lord actually has like defense points, so it can like defend itself and stuff. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Catch you later. Bye, everyone.